Yeah, let's just start. We're going to start from a blank slate because I consider myself an expert. You'll be able to start from a blank slate too, but we have templates that you can use as well. We are building that template library as quickly as we can and have a lot of ideas of how to expand it. But point being, you don't have to start from a blank slate. But for showing you what these little building blocks are, I think that's the best way to start. So let's start just by creating an event. And so I'm going to double click and it gives me this box. And inside the box, treat this, you can kind of think of this, the easiest on ramp is to think of this field here that the cursor's blinking in as kind of a spreadsheet cell. So we can do, and in Summit, these cells though, which we call events, they always start with an equal sign, unless you're doing some other kind of arithmetic, which I'll show you in a second. But to get started, you want to start with an equals because we're going to set a value. And I'm just going to hit the number 1000 and then click outside and we can run this. And down below, so what just happened here? First of all, we see 1000 repeating down below once every month. And obviously we had the number 1000 in here. The reason that happened is this little repeating pattern here, this refresh icon, means that this event, that's what it's called, this bundle here, this box, is set to monthly at the top. So this is your recurring pattern. So this is monthly. I can change this to quarterly, for example, and rerun it. And you can see how it only appears October, January, April, July, October. So we've got quarterly frequency. We can do end of month, and you'll see that it'll show up once a month, but it's actually running on the 30th or 31st or 29th or 28th of every month. So Summit is a daily resolution modeling tool, as opposed to monthly as you might lay out in a spreadsheet. So even though you're seeing the value 1000 here over and over again, end of month is different than monthly. Monthly assumes the beginning of each month. So I'm going to set this back to monthly, and you can run it by hitting Command Return or by clicking this orange button. And I'm going to give this a name. So let's call this signups. So let's just say you had 1000 signups, and because it's signups and not money, I'm going to change the format down here from the $ to the number. So these are numbers now. And this is 1000 signups a month. Okay, so what can we do? Well, we want to send these 1000 signups a month to a just kind of let's say a basket, or we might call it a pool, a sum of registered users. So let's say this is our registered users. This is the total. Now, in Summit, instead of saying sum, there's a lot of ways to sum things in spreadsheets, and sum, sum is a very powerful function in a spreadsheet, let's put it that way. And inside Summit, there's a lot of ways to sum things. So one of those is called a pool. And it's the most simple. And what a pool does is it just collects values from another event, and it's going to grow over time. So what we've basically done is that we have a pool of registered users. We're going to start at 0 because we have 0 today. And we can just move these signups into that pool by just clicking this arrow and pointing. And when we let go, we'll see this is also dollars. We're going to change the numbers. When we let go, we can see that after, within October, it becomes 1000, then 2000, 3000, 4000, and so forth. So the pool is doing what it's supposed to do, which is it's collecting the signups each month, and it's growing that value of that pool each month by 1000. So, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So across the bottom, we have our growing number. Now, this is registered users. What we could also say is that not every registered user is necessarily an active user. So we also might want to say is that we have a certain number of active users. And this is also a pool. We're going to start it at 0. And active users is just a percentage of registered users. So some percentage each month of users that registers. Maybe this is contacts that we have, new contacts, right? And out of those, not everyone registers. I'm just going to create a flow here so you can see. So 1000 becomes registered. Then out of these 1000 registered users, we could start by saying 100% become active, but of course that's not realistic. So what we want to do instead is say that it's only going to be, and actually this is accumulating. I made a little mistake here. Let's delete this. We're going to do this instead. I'm going to model this a different way. rather than say registered users here, I'm going to say active users. Let's back this truck up for a second. So this is going to be active users instead. And what we can do is I want to show you on this arrow, we can say instead of 100% of our contacts becoming active users, maybe it's only, let's say 40%, right? So now we have 1,000 contacts, but only 40% become active users. This is also just taking care of the math for us. So we've gone 1,000, 400, 800, 1,200. So still accumulating, but this percentage sign on the arrow automatically filters the value that's coming to it or across it from the other event and accumulates only what's left over. Okay, so sorry for the little hiccup there, but I realized when I was modeling that that's not what we want to do. Fortunately, it's easy as highlighting and deleting. So we go 1,000 becomes 400. And this is a pretty fundamental concept. So what I want to show you though is you might say, okay, we have a certain number of contacts, but maybe the number of contacts we get each month, maybe that's growing, right? So in order for this 1,000 to grow instead of being 1,000 every month, we can actually add a growth rate in Summit. And we do that by using a different shape, which we call a source. So we can, let's just start initially with a source of 1,000. This is 1,000 repeating every month. And so we get the same behavior by using a source as we did just by having that equals at first. But what we can do is we can add in a growth rate. And so we say it's a source of 1,000 growing at symbol. And let's just say it's growing at 5% each time. So we can run this again and we can see down at the bottom, it goes 1,000, 1,050, and then it compounds automatically to 1,103, 1,158, and so forth. So now this is a source that starts at 1,000, grows at 5% each month because it's set to monthly. And this active users bucket is still just collecting these 40% of that new number. So now more math is happening automatically, but the model is still pretty simple, right? We could also say is that, we have these active users. Users don't stay active forever, right? So the number of active users, we have churn, right? So we can also not just have a positive growth rate on the source, but because we're using this pool, we can have a positive growth rate or we can have a negative growth rate, which means we're going to lose some. So let's say that we churn 3% per month of our active user base. And so each time this runs, we're actually going to lose 3% of these active users. So now we've got a growth rate on our source, and we've got a negative growth rate, which is essentially a churn rate on this pool. And so what Summit is basically allowing us to do is to build the model up top here, and then have the spreadsheet work, kind of the tedium of building and managing these rows and columns, kind of managed for us automatically. And the way it does that is that these events up here, they are managing time for us. They have time built in as a concept. So what we can do is look at Summit not just as a grid, which is the output of the model, but we can also look at it as a ledger, which means we can look at each individual event when it triggers. And when it triggers, where is that value and where is it going? What's the current state of that event? So if I click this contacts event, for example, I can see that it's dutifully triggering, on the first of each month. And this active users pool is dutifully collecting that value on the first of each month. But you can notice how, getting into the details here, just so we can kind of grasp this concept of time, this active users number is getting reported after it collects this contacts. So at 1,500, we're getting in the contacts. At 1,800, we're collecting it all. So basically all the values of the day are getting collected into this active users bucket, and then it's reporting out its value each time. So 400, 808, 1225, et cetera. So this is the ledger view. And so all the grid is doing really is it's aggregating that ledger according to these groups here. So if we want to look at a quarterly view instead, we can. If we want to look at yearly, we can. And instead of having to rebuild your columns and your rows, or at least your columns as you would in a spreadsheet, all we have to just do is tell it to group that ledger by a different time interval. So that's happening for us for free when we use Summit because time is being managed natively. Now, before I make this more complicated, I will pause and ask, does anybody not understand this? And does anybody have any questions about kind of that fundamental concept of flow from the contacts to the users pool so far? Or is there any questions you have about what you could do differently? If so, feel free to pop it into the Q&A there, and I'll answer it. Either way, let me go on and show you kind of what you can do at this point. So again, still a really basic model. I can add text. So I can say, um, this is organic signups from the homepage, right? So we can explain it to our kind of future selves or somebody else reading this model. We can adjust this text box, right? We can add a box here just to say, hey, this is our marketing kind of zone. And then I can add a box here and say, this is retention, right? You can add links as well. So if I had a kind of a profit well page or something like that we have all of our metrics on, I could put that here, and so forth. So it is kind of a Miro style, but very basic so far whiteboard. And we can even do things like change colors. So I can say, maybe this is green, and then this active users bucket is purple. So we can color code things as well. Delete just by highlighting and hitting backspace. Okay, so I can download the output of the model. So down here we call this the output table because this is the model up here. And this is the output. I can click download, and that's a paid feature, but it does automatically turn this table into a spreadsheet. So we can take it into Excel, build some charts, whatever it is we want to do with it. But why don't we make this a little bit more complicated so I can kind of show you some of the additional powers here of Summit. So I'm going to show you one other. Let's do something simple first. Let's go one to many, right? So I'm going to say we have contacts. But we also have paid acquisition, right? Which is a different source, and this is a source maybe of 500. And let's say it's 500 and it's growing. It's flat because we're going to have a fixed budget for paid acquisition. So this is 500. We're going to say this is 500 paid acquisition leads coming in per week. So we're going to make this weekly. And we're going to make sure that we can see this down here. So we're going to run this. So here's our 500 a week. And I'm going to show you down here. See how it says 500 still? It's because we're telling it to show us the last ending value that's within this period, this month. I'm going to change flow to sum instead. And you'll see how it changes to 2,500 because this event is happening weekly. So in months where there's more than more than 4 weeks, or 5 weeks, we're going to get 2,500. In other months, we'll get 2,000. So again, we're kind of taking advantage of that deep understanding of time that Summit has to automatically generate 2,500 in the months where it's 5 weeks and 2,000 in the months where it's 4 weeks. So this is our paid acquisition. And we want to convert a certain number of paid contacts, let's say, or paid registered, signups into active users as well. I'll show you a slightly different way to do that. So instead of this 40% here, we can actually create another event, and this can be a partial expression. So let's say we'll call this a conversion rate, and we can just type in times, 0. Let's say it's lower because these, paid doesn't convert as well as organic. So we'll say 20%. So now I can take this source, I can point it at this 20%. And down here, you see how it took care of the math, and it's 100. Now I'm going to sum it as well, because again, we're working with weeks inside months. So this 2,500 becomes 500. And then obviously I can just click and drag and point this at our active users. And you see this active users row updated. It automatically collected the value from this other channel, this other source, into that active users pool, right? And so now this active users bucket is collecting both our, organic, let's say organic signups. So I'm going to change this to organic signups and our paid acquisition, right? So that's interesting. That's cool. So we can have as many channels as we want to. What we can also do is let's bring in the concept of money, right? Good old expenses. So I'm going to create another pool because we want to hold money, right? That's our bank account. So we're going to say bank account. This is a pool of money. And I'm going to give it a value. I'm going to say that we have, let's just say 785,000. I can do a K for 1,000. And I can do a little bracket here if I want to for dollars and represent this. Just say, hey, this is dollars, not euros, whatever. If we want to do that, Summit lets you put in these little expressions like a less than and a greater than, just to tell you what the value is, what the units are. And so now we've got a $785,000 bank account down here. Okay. And what we're going to do is every time we convert a paid lead, every time we acquire one, we also need to pay for it, right? So what we're going to do down here is we're going to say, this is our CPC, cost per click, and it's 500 happening each time. But let's say our cost per click is, whatever, $5.43, right? And so we are going to point this at here. And then we actually want to subtract that from our bank account, right? So this is our cost. We could do a negative number here, but instead I'm just going to kind of chain together this and say, we need to times this by a -1 because this is a cost. So we're going to turn this into a cost. And we're going to point this here. I'm going to point this here. And now this bank account balance, which was 785,000 to begin with, is automatically getting drawn. Well, let's see. This is getting drawn down. Yep, getting drawn down by the CPC each time, right? So here's that cost of 27,715 that came off. Then this came off. So we're paying for cost per lead. So, in just a little bit of time, I've made a model that, maybe this is useful, maybe it's not, but we've got, the economic aspects built in as well. And it's clear, up here what's happening. But now we're starting to flesh out kind of the treasury part. And because this cost one isn't interesting, I can actually go over here on the left-hand side and click this little, looks like an HTML tag or a code bit. If I click that, I can actually hide it, just so it doesn't cause any confusion. Maybe it's not that interesting to whomever I'm showing this to, or maybe it's just private, so you can hide it. So that's another feature we have. So I'm going to keep that hidden. And so this is, the beginnings of a marketing model, which has multiple channels, multiple sources, different conversion rates per source, different costs, and then those costs driving down our cash that we have available. We could do one more if we want to. Let's say we have conferences. So this is like a conference that we do. Let's say it's a quarterly conference attendance. And, and each time we go to a conference, we get 50 business cards. And out of those business cards, we convert, let's say, high conversion rate, because that's a very high touch. So let's say 75% of those. So we go to these conferences quarterly and we're done. So again, Summit takes care of that different, we've got weekly here, we've got quarterly here, and we've got monthly here. And Summit just takes care of, managing all those differences and merging them into this pool, the single pool of active users, right? Now, you could also say, well, what if, if our active users that come from different channels have different, different retention rates? We could actually say, these are active users from a conference. And maybe if they come from a conference, they're higher value, they churn at a, much lower rate. We can do that. And we can go ahead and just delete this line and say, let's not send them there. Let's send them here instead. So we've got, different active user pools for different, channels, right? And so then obviously if we want to sum these, we could put this into we could sum these, and we could sum these by doing an event reference, which is what I want to show you now. So we don't want to send these pools to another pool, because then we're going to accumulate that accumulation. So instead, and I'll slow down and say that again. This is a pool. It's collecting active users from paid and organic. This is a pool. It's collecting active users from conferences. What we don't want to do is we don't want to point these two pools at another pool, because then it's going to essentially every month double add, right? It's going to add the total number of active users from this source and the total number of active users from that source into its pool, and it's going to grow. It's going to grow way too fast. It's going to add in too many. So all we really want to do is we just want to sum the values. So we're going to say total active users, and like a spreadsheet, we can say equals, and then to reference another event, we do the exclamation point and a tick mark. And when we do that, it brings up a list of existing events, which can be pools or sources, or any other actually shapes. So we're going to say active users plus, we're going to say active users from that conference. And so now we're going to get another row down here, which is going to be our total active users, which is going to add together. We want actually this calculation to repeat. Let's add this up monthly and run it. And so now you see this is your total number of active users. I'm going to put this below here. So we've got active users from here, active users from here, and I'm gonna make these all purple just so it's cleaner. So now you can see how we've got each of these active users is being summed into this total, right? So, we start with, let's see, we've got 1270 to start. Let me actually refresh this. Okay, rerun. Okay, cool. There we go. So I'm going to change this to numbers. So I changed this active users count to weekly because we have some users coming in weekly and some users coming in monthly. So we want to track this metric more often than monthly. So 825, 50. Now we're at 1513 because we added another 1463 is the total here plus this 50, right? 2068 plus this 50, 2568 plus this 100 is 2668. So this active users count here is the total of both of these active users pools, right? So this is kind of a metric, and we could put metrics in its own box if we wanted to, right? So we could just say these are like our KPIs. So this is the modeling space, and this is like a KPI space where we could track, you do division, subtraction, multiplication, et cetera, on these different shapes to develop KPIs or formulas that use these different entities or objects within our model. So I'm going to pull this down a little bit so you can see more. So it's kind of a tour. I think the main concept I really want you to be able to grasp and ask questions about if you don't get it is this idea of flow. So in Summit, sources are things that generate numbers and flow those numbers elsewhere. Pools are a type which we call resources that collect those values and hold them. And then, of course, you have these kind of interstitial or in-between expressions like these, which can, perform operations on the values that they're receiving before sending them on elsewhere. So flow is the fundamental concept here. And, pools collect flow, sources create flow. Now, there's one other shape, since you guys are sticking around. I will show you one more shape here that is even more powerful, and it might take a little bit more kind of get a grasp on just because it's different. So let me show you what a gate does. So I'm actually going to create a new model because I think this is getting a little busy. Let me create a new model, go to the home page here, and I'm going to click from blank. I'm going to show you the concept of a gate. So what is a gate? So we're going to start with a gate is really useful for managing time and sending values on. It's kind of a concise way to internet slowdown here. A gate is a concise way to manage time and that filtering. So let me go ahead and show you. We're going to create a source again, and we're going to have it be a source of signups. So let's say this is signups again, and I'm going to change this to a number. So what a gate can do, hit enter. So what a gate can do is it can do two things at once. So I can actually have a gate here that says active users. And instead of using that arrow and a percentage, we can use a gate. And what a gate can do is it can collect values. So we're going to start it at 0. And then it can send them on elsewhere. So I'm going to have these signups. We're still going to filter this. So we're going to say, 40% of our signups become active users. But then what happens after somebody's an active user, right? So after somebody's an active user, we have they become, some of them get lost, right? So we lose some of them. And so we're going to say, actually over here, we have lost users. And this is another gate, and it's going to hold value. And so what we want to do is we're going to have a certain percentage of our active users become lost users. So we're going to point this gate at this one and say that this is 10%. So now the thing to know is, and this is repeating monthly, I'm going to stop right here and make sure we understand what's going on here. So each of these repeat monthly, rerun the model. Okay, so, and this is monthly as well. I'm going to show the balance here of this. Okay, so what's going on? So a gate is powerful because these signups, the source becomes 400, right, when it goes to active users. So now we have 400 here. Out of those 400, 360 are going to stay active. They're going to stay kind of behind that gate, if you will. But the gate is going to open every month and release 10% of the total amount that's in the gate into this lost users bucket, right? So this lost users bucket is collecting 40 and then 10% of the new amount of active users. So it's 10% of active users each month are becoming lost, right? So this gate is retaining the users that don't flow downstream. So the 90% that don't become lost users are staying active. And the 10% that get lost are going to this gate, right? So we could also do then, so we could say, you know what, out of our lost users, we run these programs to win back lost users. So we actually recover. So this is your recovery step. So we recover, this is recovered users. I'm going to make this a pool just to illustrate. So these are users that get recovered. Out of the lost users pool, we still have their email addresses, let's say, or they haven't unsubscribed. Let's say that we win back 5% of our lost users each month. So now our recovered users bucket, again, 1,000 becomes 400. 400 gets filtered to 40. And then out of those 40, 5% of the 40, which is 2, actually get recovered. So now we have a recovered users pool that's collecting these recovered users. And as you might have guessed, since they're recovered, what we can actually say is we're just going to flow those recovered users right back into our active pool. And so now we've created a flow here where, and we're going to hide this because it's not that interesting. So we've created a flow where our recovered users go right back into the active pool. And then, not surprisingly, the next time it runs, 10% will go out. So this is a cyclical model, a cyclical graph that we created where 1,000 starts, 40%, 10%, 5%, and then back to active. So, a spreadsheet can be tricky with circular references, not to mention just managing all the rows and columns to build this kind of cyclical model. But this is a way that you can do that in Summit without creating any kind of errors. And the math is just automatic. So it's kind of more advanced concept, but very powerful in terms of handling all the filtering, delays, and then kind of sums of sums for you. So it's kind of the fundamentals I want to show you: flow and then gates. If you have any questions, again, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. I will stick around here for another minute or so. If you don't have any questions, again, this will be emailed to you. You can watch it. You can always reach out to us up here on the help. Send us a message anytime when you're in the app, and we'd love to help you get unstuck so that you can build some awesome stuff using Summit. Thank you guys for attending today. Really appreciate it.